everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Dojo Talks. If you've been following my blog, you are aware that this year the focus is on different levels of perspective to understand your organization. In January, we kicked off on Perspective 1, which is the organization as a whole. We talked about business model canvassing, functional decomposition diagramming, and value stream mapping. If you want to find out more, check that blog out on my website at www.paulaabell.com. I am happy to have with me a colleague today where we will talk about one more technique that you can leverage to understand your organization called business architecture. So sit back, relax, get ready to take some notes, and welcome to the dojo. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Dojo Talks, also known as the DT. This is the BA martial artist coming to you with my amazing friend and colleague, Columbus Brown, who, by the way, just landed from Australia and is still taking the time to do this interview with me to discuss business architecture. But before we get started, Columbus, I want people to know a little bit about you. So some of you might already know Columbus. Columbus is on the speaking sector, speaking trail. So you might have heard him speak. He is a former aircraft design engineer who transitioned into a business strategy consulting career. He brings captivating storytelling that resonates with both business leaders and technologists. He is known for engaging audiences with his humor, as he shares his hardest lessons learned and brings them to the forefront. He enables his audience to discover where they are, helps them get unstuck, and navigates them towards achieving their strategic direction. So, Columbus, thank you for joining me and being a part of this first episode that I'm doing of Dojo Talks.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share.
All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and just jump right in, because I want to glean as much of your knowledge as possible for the next 45 minutes to an hour. So tell me a little bit about when you first got exposed to this whole concept of business architecture.
So this whole concept of business architecture, which I believe is a cross-functional discipline that uses holistic views of an enterprise to align strategy with execution. So what happened with me was, I was on my career path. I was a BA. First, I was an engineer, and I thought I could do project management in IT. And it's very different. Putting things together is very different than putting people and organizations together and putting software around them. So I was on that journey, I got right in the middle of a business transformation. The company I was working for at the time was going from 400 applications to about 11. And in the center of that, we had a bunch of consulting firms, and we started doing something called capability, which I wasn't aware of at the time. But basically what we were doing was looking at all of the components of the enterprise and how we bring them together and look at it from people, process, and technology. So that was my first exposure to consulting as well, just seeing the consultants from these major companies come in and work with this company to get 400 applications down to 10 or 11.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you've had exposure to this for quite some time. So what is this thing called business architecture, and what does it really address?
So it addresses the gap between strategy and execution. So what it does is it provides really clear alignment between an organization's desired outcomes and the capabilities that are needed to help them achieve those outcomes.
Okay. So why is business architecture important? So you talked about it aligns the strategies to the capabilities and helping organizations achieve those goals. So why is business architecture an important topic or domain to focus on?
It's very simple, Paula, and I know this is your first session. I just can first ask, is it okay if I use a 4-letter S word?
And it's how you have to explain your concept. Go for it. This is all about keeping it real in the dojo.
It is silo. Silo is that key thing. And if you think about it, we're just naturally different. It's naturally different for people to gravitate around all the people who talk finance, or all the people who talk engineering, or all the people who talk marketing or product, and to almost be tribal in terms of those. We're not those people. We're different from them. We don't think like they do. And at the heart of that is just a disconnect of what's important for an enterprise. So silo or silos is where business architecture really addresses coming across those different things. So I'll give an example. If I'm deploying a platform like Salesforce, we often take a platform in other departments like finance and other places. So what business architecture does is gives each of those silos some very specific language and approaches where they can have a common catalog of the business or a common understanding of strategic objectives, those planned initiatives or platforms, and how that impacts each of them individually and the business as a whole.
Okay. Okay. It does appear that we might be having a little bit of connectivity, internet connectivity going on a little bit here, freezing. So I am sorry about that. It's probably just because of the locations that we are both in at this current time, but we are going to keep this moving because this is still some great information. So hopefully I'm coming across to you pretty clear
Mhm.
and not stagnant. Okay. So who typically does this type of business architecture work?
So typically, in terms of it's companies like mine from here on. We do that. You know,
Okay.
um, there's a but most of the goodness of what I see is happening is you've got someone who just really is passionate about bringing things together inside of a large corporation. They're typically in the middle of some kind of IT transformation that's big enough that it's a platform. It's a Salesforce. It's a SAP. It's a Workday, and they'll bring what's happened organically is they'll bring consulting companies, they'll bring people from inside of the company, leaders together, and start to use some of these approaches. So this has happened at like MasterCard, Burlington Northern Santa Fe, USAA, Wells Fargo, Principal, United Airlines, Target. So at all these places, you've had this movement of wanting to have a centric approach, a business-centric approach to the IT transformation, and that's who's really doing it in practice. There's great organizations like the Business Architecture Guild, and even IIBA has some of the business architecture um, stuff built into the BA BOC, but it's an up and coming profession, so it's like pre IIBA in terms of not a lot of people know it. I have a certified business architecture from the Guild, but it's a rising profession
Okay. So you mentioned it seems to be very IT done today, from an
today.
architecture perspective. So
hmm
what are some of the key challenges that IT is facing in this space?
So I think there's four. The first is that people hate IT. Like, let's just say it. We're slow. We promise stuff that we've been promising stuff forever. We don't typically always deliver. Now, I know Paula Bell delivers,
You best
but
believe it all the
like not
time.
everybody delivers on time and under budget. And
Mhm.
so, basically my perception is that the business kind of hates IT.
Okay.
As I've gone to different companies, that seems to be the theme. And it's like you got someone who has control of everything that you want to do, and you have to go through them, and they're not necessarily always listening to what you have. So that's the core. That's part of the core problem. Is just that realization. And I think unfortunately, what happens is in IT, we keep pressing process, like, oh, well, we'll have a framework, or oh, we'll bring you agile, or oh, we'll bring you DAD. And if you just keep waiting, I know we haven't delivered, and you may not trust us, but we're bringing this new process or framework or methodology, and it's going to solve all the problems. And I think the core problem is we're not talking to our customers. We're not getting to understand what their needs are and what processes are most important to them. So that's one. The second is just the market turbulence, the business requires stuff quickly, and they need rapid solutions. Second would be just what's going on at home. You know, I was at a client and I walked out of an enterprise architecture meeting, and they were talking about AI and stuff like Siri and Alexa and what they were going to do basically to prevent it, you know, and control it. I went to their store, the company store, and the lady said, "Alexa, will you play XYZ?" And I'm like, does anyone know that Alexa's already in the company and people are using it?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the listening to so what I'm trying to say is we basically have better technology at home than we enjoy when we go to work, and so the demands and expectations are are much higher, but
Mm-hmm.
often not communicated. You know, there's a time where people say, "Can you just make it like Amazon, or can you make it like Google, or can you make our web page like Facebook?" And
Right.
that causes a problem for IT. The last one I'll say is just a lot of these problems are complex. They don't have a linear solution, and they're cross functional. So when you get into silos, you have duplicated effort. So the demand on IT is compounded because not only is Joe from marketing talking to Salesforce, you know, Sarah from sales is piloting Salesforce, and then someone in procurement is looking at another module and maybe paying for something off a credit card. So all of that comes back to IT, and the demand is triple. You know,
Mm-hmm.
because you've got three different people that need the same solution, and there's no language for them to make it common.
So, what are some of the techniques that are leveraged to effectively execute on or conduct business architecture?
So some of the key techniques would be around business motivation, understanding the purpose in terms of purpose or vision. Now, a lot of times when we talk about that, we resign that to like a very high level function, like, well, that's something that my CEO, my C-level folks should be doing. Every department, I would say every person, every business unit has some sense of purpose or motivation of why they're doing and what they do, what the mandate is for them to do. So that's one piece of it. And from that mandate of what they're trying to achieve comes, what services do I have to offer, in terms of services? Like, even before that is who am I delivering value to, and what are the different segments of that? And then you get into more of the how of what abilities do I need, people, process, information technology, to achieve the desired business outcomes that tie back to the why and the what. And and that's where I think people understand that, you know, a lot of people will talk about process. Well, process is one piece of that capability. It's also data. It's also what are the technologies? And mind you, a technology could be a wheel. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be software. Um, what are the people in organization? What are the roles? What's the operating model? So business architecture has a well-defined approach, I won't say process, to defining what um, needs to be in place versus the how we're going to do it. And we often focus on the how, and that's the gap. Um,
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. So, in your experience and from you doing this work, what are some of the do's and don'ts that you would recommend the audience to be aware of if they are, number one, interested in getting
mhm.
into business architecture, have started in business architecture? What has been your experience with that?
So the first thing I would do is don't call it business architecture.
Don't call it business architecture. Why
So,
not?
right, ironically, um, you know, the first part is the architecture word is often seen as something that's very technical or slow. In our company, we've gone the way of calling it business design, the design of business. Now, I do know there's a practice and there's certifications and a body of knowledge that's called business architecture, but I don't talk to my customers about it. I talk to my customers more about what do they want to achieve. So that first thing is talk more about the insights of what you're providing to your a lot of business analysts and a lot of technical people tend to be more like we really like our tools like we're really proud of our tools and how we get to the answers where the business just wants the answers.
So you broke up
A
a
couple
little
other
bit
things
there.
is
Well, you broke up a little bit
sure.
there when you were talking at the very beginning. So you went into the business design, but then you went into the segue of talking about um, how you position yourself in for business design. So can you say that again? Because you did kind of freeze a little bit on me when you started that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this time I won't freeze.
Okay, all right.
So so, so the key thing is don't call it business architecture. Talk more about the insights that you're providing. You know, architecture tends to be something that feels complicated to the business folks. I would talk more to the insights that you're going to provide. And then even with that, the next thing I would really recommend would be it's about sponsorship. So I like to use the illustration of there's this great banquet going on and the C-levels are having this banquet. And you might be the person outside the door bringing stuff to the room that's you're not seeing what's going into the room. Like that's one level. Like you're not in the room, but you're bringing the water, or you're making the meal and you're bringing it. You're making that presentation. That's one piece, right? Another
Hmm.
piece is you might be invited in the room in a service capacity. You're the waiter. You don't have a
True.
voice, but you're in the room. You get to hear the conversation, but it's not appropriate for you to be part of the discussion. You're clearly just there to serve. Then you
Okay.
might get a seat at the table, and then maybe beyond the seat of the table, you're leading the discussion. Or then maybe you're the person who has the whole event and you're orchestrating it. So along with that is just sponsorship and knowing where you're at in that cycle and building trust. If you're outside the door, bring the best presentations that you can
Right.
to be able to be a waiter. If you're a waiter, be the best waiter that you can. If you're invited, be present. You have a voice at the table, speak up. And if you're going to organize that type of event, make sure it's the best. So it's all about being patient, building trust, and creating value as you move up the chain to be part of the conversation.
Well, that's typically what we do in most of our jobs anyway, right? You have to build that trust,
Hmm.
build your credibility, build your skill set, be the best of whatever skill or whatever domain you're in, be that best person, be the best version of you. So it's a lot of the same concepts. It's just a different perspective that you're bringing to the organization on providing insights and design and those things. So it's just a different layer, a different level, which goes
Hmm.
perfect with what I've been talking about in my blog around levels of perspective. So this is just another level
Right.
that's not, even though it's called business architecture and it has a technology flair to it, it's more than that. And so don't let the
Hmm.
words trip you up on what the true value that you're bringing. So I love it. I love it. So do you have any other do's and don'ts that you can think of that you've experienced? You gave us quite a lot here, but is there anything else that resonates that you can think of that you would want to warn us against?
I say one more thing is oftentimes we go toward trying to validate the role of a business architect. It's like I got all this great stuff. I want to create a department. It's like that's all good. The more you focus though on just creating value, folks will come back and say, I want to clone that person. Like I want a clone of this, right? So we get
Hmm.
ahead of ourselves sometimes in trying to get a certification or
Hmm.
formalize the role, versus deliver. And when you deliver, the formality follows.
Nice, nice. I like that. All right, so we talked a little bit about the do's and don'ts of business architecture. And so there's this concept of service models. So How would you describe what a service model is in this whole concept of business design?
So when you talk about a service model, I think there's four primary ways that you can deliver value to a customer around business architecture. The first would be organizational performance. So I have a an enterprise-wide view of what's going on. I'm talking not just technology, but also people and process. So I'm gonna deliver things like cost analysis, performance models, things like benefits realization. The second one, which is the one that's it's the main entry point, is business transformation related to a tool. So I'm deploying Salesforce and I'm deploying that, and I need to know how it's going to affect the organization, how it's going to change. So I'm going to look at my organization, not just the technology, but from a change management perspective. And I want to understand, like, how do I make new decisions? What are the capabilities? How do I deploy this new product or service, and what's the impact of it? The third one, which is interesting, often still in IT, though, is project support. You'll see either IT portfolio management or a project support. So it's like looking at, hey, here's what the business needs. How does that map to what we're doing? What's most important in terms of those capabilities? And oh, by the way, is there a capability that we're looking at software to fulfill that could actually be done by a person? It doesn't need to
Mhm.
be automated. It could be something that we could shift our culture or do things differently. And then the fourth, which is like the the highest level of Zen or whatever for a business architect. And just to be realistic, very few organizations or people make it into this spot. Would be, hey, I'm working with the strategy or corporate strategy folks, and basically when they pitch what we're doing, like I'm the girl or I'm the guy who says, that's a great idea. We can or can't do that. Here's why. Because I can look at the value chain of the whole business. I could look at the strategy and look at how much change is going to be impacted on a different organization. Um, Very useful, but just very hard to get that kind of seat at the table.
Mhm.
Just even if you have the best insights, very difficult, highly political. So those are the four models I see: the organizational performance type one, the business transformation, IT portfolio, project support, and
Mhm.
strategy.
Okay. Okay. So we talked a lot about what it is, what it's not, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what it's
Hmm.
comprised of through the service models. What are some of the challenges that IT faces as you look into this domain? And how do you effectively leverage or conduct business architecture? What's critical to the success of
Hmm.
of this concept of this of doing business design? What's critical, would you say, to the success? And I know one thing you had mentioned that I caught was sponsorship when we were
Yeah,
talking above, right? So I'm
yeah.
quite sure that will come up, but I'm interested to hear what other factors do you think are critical to success?
So I say there's about 10 steps, to creating this in your organization. One is like, what business are you in? Do you understand your industry? Do you understand what your company's goals are, your competitors? The second is what's already out there to leverage. If you're with a public company, it's a very easy way to find out what's wrong and where the opportunities are is to go to the end of your investor analyst call and look at the questions they ask. They're going to talk about the big IT transformations and when is it going to return. Um, and who are you working for? Is your customer IT? Is your customer the strategy group? Is it is the actual business? And how will you provide? Four would be how you provide value to that group. Five is have your own personal vision and strategy for how you're going to do that. Then I would go into six, identifying any roadblocks. Then create seven. We talked about a service model. Like, what is your service? Are you going to be, how you're going to provide value, but how are you actually going to do that? Is it going to be by advisement? Is it going to be by providing insights? Um, I'd say 8 would be determine what you need to deliver that value, that service, and who you need in terms of people. And then have like a roadmap, um, 18 to 36 months of what you're going to do to get that seat at the table and influence your company.
Wow. If that wasn't a great way to end the whole conversation, you pretty much just gave everyone the steps on how do you do this now. So we talked about what it is. We talked about some of the things you might run into, but then you nicely ended it with, okay, so this is how you do it. I'm pretty much going to give you the steps. Now go forth and conquer. So Columbus, is there anything else you want to add that you would like to tell the audience? Now, I will say that a lot of the topics we've been talking about in my blog in the month of January was around just understanding the organization. So we spent time talking about the business model canvas. We spent time talking about functional decomposition diagramming. We spent
Mhm.
time talking about value stream mapping. And then I wanted to end it off with a bang, talking about business architecture and having somebody that we can talk to. So based on the levels of perspective and knowing where I'm going, is there anything else you would like to add?
I just say, like have an intention. My intention is to develop leaders, to create communities of purpose, and to design meaningful things that impact the world. Having a good intention and being aware of that really helps you sort through um, what you want to do personally and what you want to participate in, see opportunities in different ways. So that's what I'd leave with you guys with. For me, at the heart of what I do, with family or work, is that thing that I'm developing leaders from my lessons earned. I'll say earned, not learned. Um, and then creating communities. We have a great community in Dallas Fort Worth called DFW Band, where we nurture design thinking and business architecture. And then, my work with From Here On, leading the US area, is just we want to design meaningful things that impact the world. So
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you once again for sharing your knowledge with all of us. Is there any contact information you want to leave in case anybody wants to reach out to you to continue
sure.
the conversation?
I'm on LinkedIn, and also the name of the business that I'm a part of is FromHereOn.com. And there's a lot of resources there if you want to learn more about business architecture, business design, or design thinking at the next level. Check us out.
Perfect, perfect. And thank you everyone for joining and dealing with all of our little technical difficulties we've had through this. I think we figured out how to make this a little bit more smooth going forward with this being our first episode. But I'm looking forward to start sharing perspective 2, where we will focus on customer experience in March. So look for a new blog post on that. And I do have a customer experience expert that should be joining us in April for a very similar interview. So I'm excited about that. So get ready for another great couple of months of knowledge. Again, Columbus, thank you so much for taking time in the airport, nonetheless, to join me once you got off the plane from Australia. I really appreciate that, making this work. But for now, I'm going to sign off. This is the BA Martial Artist coming to you from Dojo Talks. Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you, Paula.